It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George, and the game is afoot. Yes, we have finally decided to spur on this incredible
Johnny,
investigation.
How good does it feel to be correct and righteous in your opinion and accurate in your forecasting and your assessment abilities? Like, are
Well,
we not
I don't have
just
anything
so
to compare
on
it to.
when we are calling this stuff for the
I
Ohio
don't have
State faithful?
I don't have anything to compare it to, but it feels pretty sweet. Of course, we are referring to Michigan and the report from ESPN, Dan Murphy and Pete Thamel, who Michigan fans will have you know, Pete Thamel, complete hack. You can't trust anything he says unless he's saying something bad about Ohio State. They have reported that there is a notice of allegations, which sounds actually like it sounds intimidating until you break it down by its individual words. Like it's a notice, like something they just posted on somebody's door, and it's like it's a draft of a notice of allegations. And so the allegations, like, well, we allege that you might have done this. We don't really know, but taken together, it sounds very official and scary. And so the draft of this notice of allegations for the University of Michigan sign stealing scandal. I can say that. From Connor Stalions and
Connor Stalions,
and allegedly a bunch of other Michigan staffers and coaches. It looks like they're doing something. It looks like the NCAA, there's some things that they're talking about.
But I was told this is nothing to be considered. This is
that's right.
Michigan is unbothered by this, according to their esteemed journalism circle.
Yes, that's right.
The Maize and Blue Wall of Silence said this is not a big deal and to not even expect a bowl ban, in spite of what the esteemed, revered Chris Ballas reported last weekend. Michigan Rivals said there's absolutely nothing that's going to happen the day after we posted the Dubcast last week saying the Michigan beat is full of BS.
And who could possibly not determine that based on nothing, right? Like, wouldn't it be so easy just to say that nothing's going to happen because we don't know anything yet? Like, I feel like that's a solid analysis.
Holding your tongue
situation.
and waiting for facts to emerge is not how you do journalism in the 21st century, Johnny.
Well, it's not how we do things.
You report first and you verify second. That is how you get clicks and build a brand.
Right. Or you just put stuff out there to assuage your fans and make it so that they don't freak out about, anything that anybody else reports. Like, no. Listen to us because we'll make you feel good. Here at the Dubcast, we don't want to make anybody feel good. We want you to feel bad all the time. And especially if you're a Michigan fan.
We want you to feel the truth, which is why we said what we did last week. And look where you are now, listeners.
So the report says the draft of the notice of allegations, the report of the draft of the notice of allegations says that the NCAA recovered Moore's texts via device imaging, and Moore subsequently produced them to the enforcement staff. Allegedly, Sherrone Moore, Michigan football coach Sherrone Moore, deleted a text chain of 52 texts. I think 52, maybe 53.
52.
It's 53. No, it's 52. Anyway, 52 texts with Connor Stalions, which I guess he deleted it the day this stuff broke.
That's what an innocent person does. Is
exactly.
Communications the day the slanderous scandal report comes out.
Anytime somebody's in a position of power and they immediately delete all communications related to a scandal, that guy is 100% innocent of anything. But he did eventually, allegedly, provide these texts to the NCAA. I don't know if that influences the current notice of allegations, the draft that Thamel and Murphy saw at ESPN. I don't freaking know. But anyway, all of this goes to a bunch of other things that they've been investigating related to the sign stealing. The NCAA apparently was alleging that Stalions removed hard drives from the Michigan football offices and gave them like a sheet of plays, like on his way out. It was like keep it secret, keep it safe. And he's like giving them, all of his stuff allegedly, according to the reporting. And I don't know, man, like prior to all of this coming out, I was pretty reluctant to say that Michigan was going to get anything from this, right? That this is all going to just basically amount to nothing because the NCAA is,
we were approaching this with very, cautionary mindset.
Yeah, they're pretty toothless.
We'll be happy with what happens, and the precedent here is there's
right. I would love for them to get a bowl ban. I think that would be hilarious, but I wasn't counting on it. Now, if this reporting is accurate, and if the notice of allegations that actually exists, the current one is in line with this draft, like if it hasn't undergone significant changes, and we'll get to that part of it in a second. This is really significant. It also confirms, by the way, that Connor Stalions was on the sidelines of Central Michigan and I think Michigan State. That was the game that was being played in full spy gear, wearing his recording glasses. Which, obviously it was him. I think everybody knew that was him, but it's just nice to have that confirmation, right? It's nice to feel
there was reasonable doubt because he
was there
yes, because there are many, many men that look like that on the sidelines of college football that have beards and sunglasses and hats. He had a very indistinguishable visage, which is probably part of the reason why he thought he could get away with it, and very nearly did.
Too damn good, God.
Right, exactly.
He did look like
it's one of those ideas where when you're thinking about it, you're like, this is so ridiculous that nobody's going to call me on it, which is why I'm going to go ahead and do it.
It did feel like he
almost was correct.
Yeah, it did make it well until an intrepid writer known as Johnny Ginter tracked his picture down in the 11 Warriors archives and offered concrete evidence that in fact he was on the sidelines.
And we got that enhanced photo technology for Law and Order special victims.
I'm sitting at my desktop enhanced. Rotate 90 degrees.
Oh my God.
Adjust yaw.
Connor Stalions.
Oh my God. Which I don't know why I take my glasses off. I'm blind.
Wait until Reddit hears about this.
That's right. I do think it's kind of funny that on the sidelines he looked like a creative coach, from NCAA.
Well, we were advocating for them to make a Stalions NPC on the sidelines for the new game.
Yeah.
Then we found out one of the creative directors at EA Sports is a Michigan alum, and we were like, oh, well, that's not going to happen then.
Yeah, which, by the way, I've been playing the game a decent amount in the past week or so. You can kind of tell a little bit that there's a little Michigan bias in it against Ohio State. I'll play it a little bit more. We'll probably get more into it in the coming weeks here. But I'll offer my full review, I guess, to come. But you can kind of tell there's hints of the anti-Ohio State bias in it, which is kind of annoying. Judkins aside. Anyway, back to all this crap. So look. The Michigan, the insiders, right? The rivals boards, all those guys. I think they've started to try to circle the wagons yet again. We saw how well that worked out for them, with regards to the Harbaugh news about him going to the NFL. Clearly, they were wrong on that.
Again, before we I know we're stroking our own egos here, but before we get into what their defensive tactics have been relative to the ESPN report that came out Sunday, I do want to go back and specifically look at what the bucket of cold water dump that came out the day after our show went out last week.
Sure, yeah.
Not saying this was in response to what we said, but the timing is interesting relative to the Ballas report that came out Monday. And then 2 days later, we get a report from the lead publisher at Maize and Blue Review that states the following. First and foremost, there's zero concern in the athletic department currently about any potential bowl bans. In fact, there was some surprise that was even mentioned at all. According to multiple sources, there have been 0 level 1 charges found regarding as far as punishments go. And then it comes out today that in addition to more, former Michigan staffers Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Denard Robinson, and Stalions are also all accused of committing level 1 violations.
Right.
These people are talking out of their butts.
Right. Yeah. So that's the thing. The only way for that to be right is if the draft of the notice of allegations that ESPN reported on is so substantively different than what Michigan is seeing from the NCAA, which could be true. It could be possible that Michigan is actually being kept in the dark, or they're just in the dark in general about how the NCAA is investigating this. I would not be surprised at all.
They can't be in the dark because apparently they've got a new draft.
Well, that's
which
what I'm
is
saying.
funny because the same report from Maize and Blue Review last week says there was a time when UM felt it wouldn't receive a notice of allegations at all, considering the findings, though that still remains unclear. There's been talk that an NOA is coming, but we have yet to confirm a timeline. Oh, so on Wednesday, they didn't know if an NOA even existed. And but 4 days later, they have a new draft of one, and ESPN's got the old one?
Right. And that's exactly where I'm getting at. I don't feel like they have any idea what's actually, like, the NCAA is actually doing. And that may be intentional on the NCAA's part. That just might be incompetence on everyone's part. But my whole point with this is that, first of all, it seems a lot more serious than Michigan has been led to believe. The people who are reporting this,
there's no fight to be had, was the direct narrative on Wednesday. That seems like a joke today.
Right. And I think there's some people who are reporting on this who are trying to keep people, like, they're trying to get people on their side by saying that there's nothing.
They're trying to get them behind the Maize and Blue wall of silence.
Yeah. Well, you see this in a lot of places, in a lot of different, sports fandoms and things like that, in different sports and different.
Not at Ohio State, though.
Not at Ohio State. Never at Ohio State.
At least when it comes to 11 Warriors,
not at 11 Warriors, and we've taken heat for that. We've taken heat for that when we report on stuff and get people pissed at us for saying, this is a thing that happened. But it does happen pretty much everywhere where it's
what
like
journalism is, man.
Well, and that's what sucks, is that when someone is telling you exactly what you want to hear in the moment because they want to win this, they want to win this, I guess, affection of the reader by reporting stuff that they'll be like, they won't say anything's definitively true. They'll just say, like, well, we're hearing this or this. And it's always like sugar coated. It's always, there to kind of massage the fans' egos. And that's really bad reporting. And it really feels like at this point, that's kind of what's going on with Michigan and some, sectors of what they've got, which is
if the report from Wednesday doesn't confirm that relative to what we know now, I don't know what else will. I don't know how you can have, I know it's wishful thinking for Michigan fans, but as an objective college football fan, I don't know how you can be led to believe in the supposed new draft that is, supposedly much more conciliatory to Michigan when if such a draft existed and the old draft has already been leaked, why is Michigan not already leaked the new draft to their beat in order to kind of pour more cold water on what is being alleged in this NOA? It doesn't make any sense if it actually
and as far as
exists.
The reporters go, my thing is that if you're hearing that, let's say Michigan's giving you that information, right? Let's say Michigan or whoever, right, is telling you that, oh, no, there's a different one. It's not as bad or whatever. Wouldn't you, as a reporter who's trying to report on things honestly, be like, hey, maybe the people giving me this information have a vested interest in, putting out this story in the best possible light for Michigan. Maybe I shouldn't take this at face value. Maybe when I talk about this to people who are paying a subscription to our website, maybe when I talk about this, I at least frame it in that context so that people then can understand and make their own determination about whether or not this is real or not, right? Instead of saying, oh, no, guys, it's going to be great. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. We've got a whole other thing and it's totally fine. You can't see it. You can't hear about it. I can't show it to you. Just trust us that it's great. Also, we'll take $13.99 per month. Thank you very much. That's the thing that it drives me up a wall. And I know this is kind of a meta thing.
Pay $15 a month for what you want to hear.
Yeah, right. and this is beyond, whatever's going on with Michigan. But I'm like, man, you cannot. I plead with people, don't pay people money to have them tell you what you want to hear. Okay. Maybe sometimes they are going to tell you what you want to hear because that's the truth. That's fine. But you got to have more credulity about whether or not somebody's just trying to butter you up. And that's what it feels like sometimes. And that's what it felt like when they were reporting about Harbaugh going to the NFL. That's what it felt like when they were talking about,
which time when they were reporting on Harbaugh going to the NFL.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We have three different cycles of that now in the last 3 years.
Right. And it's I don't know. And this isn't just Michigan. Like I said, this does impact Ohio State. It impacts every sports fandom, but please just be more skeptical of, positive information when it seems to go against other honest reporting. Pete Thamel is not a bum, right? Dan Murphy is not a bum. These guys are legitimate reporters. They're not going to put something out there that's going to like bite them in the ass immediately, right? They're going to put something out there that they think is reasonably true and will continue.
I love that true. Pete Thamel is now the Brett McMurphy.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Brett McMurphy to Ohio State is now Pete Thamel to Michigan.
I know. And it's like, please just let the investigation work itself out. And if it ends up being bad, then that sucks and you have to deal with it. And if, let's say that all these insiders are right and maybe the notice of allegation is, isn't nearly as bad and all of them will be vindicated, that's fine too. But like, people just want to be completely right in the moment and say like, okay, well, this is not a thing or this is 100% a thing. And like, you can't make that determination yet. What we do have is a pretty strongly worded draft that includes a lot of allegations, not a lot of evidence. We should definitely point that out. Not a ton of like hard evidence where we know all these things.
They're not going to show their whole hand here.
No, they're not. They're not.
But actually been released.
But my point is that that's why I'm couching all of this and saying we don't know yet, right? I can't say definitively that Michigan's going to get the death penalty or they're going to.
There is some evidence though. Like they did gather evidence confirming that the Central Michigan sideline thing happened.
Oh yeah,
which is at least aesthetically
which is the funniest part of all.
The funniest and most bizarre component of this story
by far.
And
yes.
in a way,
except for the vacuum stuff.
That's they even say in terms of like, the impact that has on it, even though it's like the aesthetics of it are obviously hilarious. They even go on to say in the reporting of the story, the conduct specifically relative to that, where you are now interloping an unrelated MAC school into the mess you have created among this scouting ring.
It's like the NCAA's like
that is
like
conduct that quote seriously undermined or threatened the integrity of the NCAA collegiate model, which it 100% does.
Sure,
you're dragging multiple schools across conferences now down into your mess,
right?
And they have evidence of him doing that goes further than just, us looking at the game footage and being like, oh my God, that otherwise unassuming person is actually Connor Stalions.
Yeah.
Like there's more evidence here than I think even like you're willing to say based on that statement. They haven't played the whole hand yet. But today's report was extremely damning in a way that I think a lot of people aren't really being like as conciliatory towards as they otherwise should be.
Well, like I said, I mean, the only way this really turns out well for the insiders and the people who have said this is like, some, total misunderstanding and everything great for Michigan is if everything that they had in that draft that was reported on has basically been chucked into the trash, right? Because unless that's the case, that's pretty damning, like top to bottom, right? Like it's not, I mean, they talk about, we actually, have a really good article. Chase Brown did an excellent summary of it on the website. But that Harbaugh was involved in, it doesn't have evidence that Harbaugh was involved in Stalions' operations or that he knew about the scheme. However, it does say that Harbaugh failed to look for or evaluate red flags associated with Stalions. Multiple team interns and at least one full-time employee knew about the scheme and participated in it.
And they have everybody in this flagged as repeat offenders, which is really what the NCAA seems to be most upset about in terms of, okay, like even if we don't have Harbaugh, like, I mean, they might, but they haven't played the hand yet in terms of directly linking the entire staff to Stalions' scheme. They're still saying, look, not only should you have known about
might
this,
be implicated in it,
right? They've supposedly got that now based on all the deleted messages that they then recovered, and then they're linking that not only to what happened with Stalions, but saying you have not been forthcoming and cooperating with us now in multiple instances, and that has to count for something against you too, on top of what's being alleged here. Right. So, this all just looks horrible for them in a way that almost nobody has wanted to be conciliatory towards from that side.
Right. And it's the funny thing about all of this is that, like, I don't know about
There's
you.
a whole bunch of other recruiting stuff in there too that came out today that we didn't even previously know
That's
about.
Right. The thing about this, though, and I've been pretty consistent about it since this whole thing broke, is that on a base level, right? Like Connor Stalions doing his ridiculous, like, COINTELPRO
Tactical
investigation,
espionage.
his tactical espionage, doing his best, solid snake impersonation. I think it's funny. I don't think it really I know it matters from a football standpoint. I'm not saying they didn't get an advantage. They clearly did. If they got information from opponents and things like that, then obviously you're going to get info. If you know their signs, I mean, that's a big deal. But also, it's not one of those things where I'm like outraged as a person. Like, I'm not sitting here going like, oh man, ban these people from football for life or anything like that. But as it often is, the fact that they thought that they were getting away with it, and then I think kind of refused to believe that they weren't getting away with it anymore, is probably going to lead to them doing things. Or my guess is that in the course of this investigation, they found out that they were doing things that were much worse, to try to basically not say like, hey, we found this out, we fired the guy. If they just been upfront about it, I don't think this would be nearly the scandal that it's blown up into. But because they're like, no, this is really helpful to us, this is something that we feel like we got away with, they were so motivated by that belief that they continue to do worse and worse stuff to try to, to get away with it, to continue getting away with it. And that's where, even if, and in some insane universe where Sharon Moore and Connor Stalions had 52 texts back and forth about like vacuum cleaners or something that weren't coded messages about stealing signs, even if it was completely innocent, like, if that's the case, you just say, hey, this is everything. You give it to the NCAA and you probably stop the investigation in its tracks. You don't delete it immediately and hope nobody finds out that message chain existed. So it's just, the whole thing's weird. It's goofy. It's funny. And I look forward to Michigan, being banned for the next century.
The other thing in this report that I'm going to be curious about, like, because they're putting the timeline together, but they haven't revealed all of the details of the timeline yet. And it's interesting that you not only had the deletion of the text message thread that happened in October, the same day that the media reports were coming out, but then you also had, as you referred to earlier, Stalions removing hard drives from Michigan.
Right.
So number one, does that have something to do with the computer crimes that was it Partridge that got fired for those?
I think it was Partridge. I can't remember. Maybe it was Yoon. I can't remember who was doing the computer crime. I think it might have been Partridge who was doing the computer crimes. At least
then on top of that,
the non-specific computer crimes, I think it was what it was. But the timeline may not match up for that.
No, you know what? It wasn't him. It was Matt Weiss.
That's right. That's right. It was Weiss. Okay.
So I wonder if there was some overlap with that. But the thing I'm more curious about is what the timeline for it was, because they say that not only did he remove the hard drives, but then he went and took the opponent play calling sheet and gave it to an intern, supposedly for being relayed back to the coaching staff. So after it came out that they had been caught doing this and the public knowledge was out there, did Stalions then, instead of just getting rid of everything in an attempt to cover up Michigan, did he not only attempt to cover it up, but then give the results of his scouting operation, what was remaining, to the staff so that they could still use it even after they had been caught? Because it's one thing for them to be not compliant and try to cover up their cheating, but for them to then actively continue cheating while trying to relay that they hadn't done anything wrong, that I think escalates this into a totally different sphere where
100%.
Now I'm a little bit more interested in just getting the conciliation that we talked about last week in terms of wins, like
vacating win.
I some people have gone as far as to saying that they should be awarded forfeitures. I think that should be more back on the table if this component of the story is true, but it would be very extreme for the NCAA to strike down a national title. But if everything that is in that notice of allegations turns out to be accurate and backed up by evidence, you really have to question how you hold up the integrity of the sport, specifically given the language that they use to refer to the fact that Stalions seriously undermined or threatened the integrity of the NCAA collegiate model. If he did that, how can you respect the current champion?
Yeah, I think there's a ways to go before you get from where we're at right now to there. I do think the components are there, but it's one of those things where you would have to be able to prove
this is if everything that's in the report is vindicated by evidence.
Right.
I'm thinking best case scenario for Ohio State
that's
fans
right. That's right.
Which is not where I was last week. Last week I wanted to be realistic. But now that we're in this stage, it's worth at least talking about.
No, I think so too. And if that is the case, if the NCAA has hard evidence that Michigan continued to cheat even after, if they continue to use that information even after Stalions was fired and even after they had already been like notified that there were things going on, then absolutely, like I think that has to be on the table, right? Because we've said this before. If all of this stuff had come out at a different point in time, if it had come out like right after the national championship or like right after the Michigan game, totally different conversation, right? Like completely different conversation about what this means and then what, the impact is. What has really protected Michigan in a lot of this is that they've been able to say, oh, well, we got rid of the problem, right? We got rid of the problem and then we did things the right way after that and it's totally fine. And if there's any evidence to the contrary, that completely undermines that argument. So I'm with you 100%. Like if there is evidence that says that they continue to do stuff that they weren't, supposed to be doing in terms of spying and sign stealing and whatnot, then that's a whole different ball game. Now, again, that's a big if. That's a huge if, because we don't even know if that's what happened, much less there's evidence to prove that. What there is evidence of is Connor Stalions on the sidelines of Central Michigan and Michigan State. There is a text chain between the current head coach of Michigan and the guy who was stealing signs, right? Like we know that exists. They can't claim that they didn't know each other or didn't talk or didn't interact, which was also another claim by Michigan fans and Michigan
insiders. And they said they have ticket information, film, photographs, and interviews that determine Stalions had impermissibly scouted at least 13 future Michigan opponents on at least 58 occasions between 2021 and last year.
And what Michigan has been saying, the Michigan defense to this, is that he's a rogue actor. He was doing it on his own. None of the staff knew about it. It was just this one
agent
nut
of chaos.
That's right. It was just one lone nut who was doing it all by himself. And now, of course, we've got, we know that at least Connor Stalions and Sharon Moore interacted. I don't know what else they would interact about. Maybe they're golf buddies. I don't know. Maybe they're buying shirts off each other. But like that's
tips for vacuum repair.
Yeah, tips for vacuum repair. I don't know. But what I do know is that if you're a Michigan fan or an Ohio State fan waiting anxiously with bated breath for all of this, you're going to have to wait a little bit more to get anything concrete. But probably not too much longer, because as we alluded to here, you've got the Connor Stalions thing coming out in late August, right? In just a few weeks, right? That whole Netflix thing. I can't imagine that the NCAA is going to love the fact that a draft of a notice of allegations is just floating around. I got to believe that this is all going to come to a head pretty soon, and I think ideally for every, yeah, exactly. And ideally for everybody involved before the season starts, because what if you're Michigan? You got to fire head coach. What if he gets a show cause or a suspension?
Show cause before the first snap. That would be extremely funny.
It's like somebody who's serving somebody a subpoena or whatever, and so they're just gonna run onto midfield like before the kickoff and just hand show more an envelope and then run off. It's we got you. We knew where you were gonna be, buddy.
Yeah, and this whole thing just makes that interview after the Penn State game so much weirder.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah,
it's exactly. Those were tears of guilt.
Yeah, tears of
that was his subconscious screaming out to the truth.
Yeah, it definitely takes on a different tone than it did at the time. I'm with you on that. So anyway, the whole thing's crazy. We spent a half hour talking about it, but we had to, because this is funny stuff.
Because we were very, very on the money on our show last week.
That's right, and
because the Dubcast knows ball. We've been saying it since last season, and we continue to be vindicated.
And you know what? If we're vindicated again, we're going to spend an entire hour. And if that just keeps going, it's just going to get exponentially longer, and we're never going to shut up about it. So just deal with it. Sorry.
And
that's
why
just how
would
it goes.
we?
Why would we be? Exactly. Okay, so let's change tacks a little bit. Let's talk about actual football things that are actually happening on the field right now, as opposed to notices or drafts or whatever. Fall camp started. Hooray. Like, do you get excited for fall camp? I mean, well, I don't mean in the sense that like football's coming soon, because I think everybody's excited about that, right? Like the prospect of football starting, but like the idea that players are practicing.
We talk about practice,
right?
Not a game, not a game. Practice.
Does that get you amped up? Have you bought one of the tickets to go see?
I have a very Allen Iverson mindset towards practice.
And that's fine.
And again, just a quick aside, when this was brought up about them selling tickets to practice like many months ago, where we were like, how is that going to go? And I said, I guess they're doing it because they think there's a market for it, but I can't imagine that they're necessarily going to sell out of those, but we'll see what happens. And it doesn't seem like
they would. I thought these things would go like gangbusters, but apparently
it doesn't seem like ticket sales went for it as swimmingly as people thought.
Apparently not.
I don't think that people gear up for this stuff. I think people are excited for the developments that come out of practice, and that's why we're very grateful to people like Dan and Chase and Andy and Garrick that are out there getting the information for us so that we don't have to hawk it. But I'm squarely locked in for August 31st in terms of the first game. And even then, like, the non-conference slate for Ohio State is so weak this year that it's hard for me to even gear up for that. So I'm someone who's been tempering expectations for everything relative to this upcoming season.
Well,
I will say what I'm most excited about in terms of early developments from practice is that it seems like we're finally getting towards a clear-cut starter at quarterback. And that's what I'm grateful to learn.
That's what I wanted to talk about, because there are a lot of juicy tidbits that come out of practice occasionally. You finally get to talk to coaches and players and things like that. I love the fact that for instance, Caleb Downs, is apparently Jim Knowles' new best friend. I love that. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because within Jim Knowles' defense, right, he really, really puts a lot of focus on that. I guess what they call like the robber, the guy who's like kind of the free safety who does a lot of different things, can play in coverage, can come up and run support, all that kind of stuff. That's a big part of his defense. He likes to have that guy who can be really multiple. And Caleb Downs is like the epitome of that. I mean, in what he's capable of doing. So that's fun. That's cool. But yeah, the fact that it's pretty much, it looks like it's it looks like Will Howard is pretty much got this thing on lockdown. He had, according to our reports, kind of a mediocre first day, and then just proceeded to kill it the next, I think 3 days after that. Developing a good rapport with the wide receivers. I guess one time he ripped off like a huge run that people are like, oh crap, this dude's got some wheels. I think he's been taking a pretty prominent role in terms of
I thought it was funny.
leadership.
All the hype beast Twitter accounts were like, he had a 85 yard touchdown in practice. And then, our own journalists were like quietly like, he could have been forced out at like the 50 or 60. If they
but still,
they're actually allowed to breathe on the quarterbacks in practice.
Right.
It wouldn't have been a touchdown.
Yeah. I think
still
people
a very impressive run for a quarterback.
Of course. Yeah. But I agree that the dude's not, he's not Barry Sanders. But all reports, all indications is that he's practicing with the ones pretty much exclusively. And I think that's all she wrote, unless something
gives me
really
more
crazy
confidence
happens.
than the situation we had last year.
Yeah, which is great.
So.
And they may not name a starter until the game, like the day of the game, right? But I think at this point it's pretty well
be earlier than last year, and that's all I want.
That's true. But I think at this point you can pretty well mark it down that Will Howard is the presumptive starter at the quarterback position for Ohio State, which I love. I love the fact that seems to be the case, that they're not waffling about this thing. I think he's got this thing on lockdown. I am not shocked by that. I don't think you bring in a dude as a transfer, a multi-year starter, pay him some NIL money and say, third string. Like, I don't think you're going to do that. So I think it's the right choice. I think it's the right decision. given that he has been performing pretty well in practice. Now, if he had been like Booty, then, I would go back to kind of what we said weeks ago, which is like, hey, youth movement, just bring it on, right? Like if he comes in and he doesn't perform well, then there's no point in trotting out a guy who's going to be mediocre, who can only play a year. But that doesn't seem to be the case. He seems like he's doing really well. So that's cool to see. I'm happy about that. Yeah, we'll see how the rest of it kind of plays out. People are still, they're still trying to figure out what the offensive line is going to look like and specifically where people are going to play. Obviously people have been talking about Jeremiah Smith and gushing over him, which just seems to be nonstop. Jermaine Matthews Jr. is out there. They're trying to figure out, who's going to be the will starter. So there's still things to figure out. There's still things to talk about, but we're still early in the process too. So it's only August 4th as of this recording. We'll see what happens on August 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and so on. So I don't know. I'm excited for it. I'm not one of those people who kind of hangs on every word from practice because I don't know that you can really read tea leaves, with Jim Knowles like blinking multiple times when he's talking about, who's going to, be in the defensive line rotation. But I also think that you can get some pretty positive indications about starters and things like that at this point. So
yeah, and I mean, if you've ever played organized football, you know that there's players that have a tendency to excel in practice, and then when the game situations actually happen, it's it's a completely different vibe and environment, and it can totally throw off your brain chemistry, right, or just the chemistry that you have with your teammates in general. So it's great to see things clicking in a simulated capacity, but game reps are always going to take the greatest priority in terms of evaluating success. So we're still, and that's why I just take everything with some cautious optimism.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just holding my breath for August 31st. But in terms of what I wanted to see relative to last year, more certainty from the quarterback battle. It seems like we are getting that. And the fact that, we had early critics, critics would be, I think, a strong word relative to, the beat opinions of Will Howard, but the fact that there's been more encouraging reporting of the results of his output in the last several days is, I think, very, it's something to feel good about as an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, it's definitely positive. I'm happy with it, and I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out going forward. All right, so we'll do some Ask Us Anything, but before we do that, we're going to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the Dry Goods Store at 11warriors.com. Drygoods.11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers. Check it out. It's cool. It's good. It's awesome. It's the Dry Goods Store at 11warriors.com. Let's do Ask Us Anything. No, I don't have a script I read from that. Why do you ask? So you can ask us anything by sending us questions to dubcast@11warriors.com. And like I said, we like answering all the questions that you ask, and we've got several here today. So we're going to go through some of these. We're going to go through them quick. All right. So this is related to the notice of allegations here. So this is from Buckeye Chief. Since the notice of allegations is finally coming for the cheaters, at what point are we going to stop beating up Ryan Day and calling him soft while finally acknowledging that he was at a disadvantage going into the game?
What I like to imagine is that even though supposedly, I mean, if you've gone far enough back in the Stalions lore, there was some, it's possible it goes back to even as far as like 2018, 2019, relative to his, because that's around when he got there. I think he was there pre-COVID,
like 2015, 2017, I think.
But I like to imagine that like when Day got on that COVID call with Harbaugh and said allegedly we're going to hang 100 on you.
That was like a locker room thing. I think.
Well, that just broke Harbaugh's brain, and he was like, "I have to beat them at any cost now."
Right.
And that was when Stalions emerged from the corner and said, "I have a proposition for you."
He comes out like Deep Throat and Watergate scandal, and he's like, I'm like in a giant trench coat, smoking cigarette. Like,
that's exactly right.
I've got some information you might want to see.
So I still think we don't know if that story actually happened or not. I think that there's some I think there's more reason to believe that some sort of interaction happened like that didn't, based on how openly petty Harbaugh has been relative to referencing the born on third base thing. Especially, I mean, granted, the wins have probably inflated his ego as well, but the fact that he's been so openly petty to Day when he couldn't do anything close to the sort against Urban Meyer, I think kind of speaks for itself in that department. And in that sense, this is sort of, it is sort of like a creation of Day, like it is Day's own problem until he rectifies it.
Yeah.
So I
people aren't going to give him credit until he beats Michigan. Like that's just like
beating Michigan's the most important thing for us as fans, and it hasn't happened in the last 3 years.
Right.
So, but I try to be cognizant of all the different elements in play here relative to Day in terms of evaluating him. I don't necessarily the fact think that every fan does that.
He's had to go up against the best Michigan teams of the past like 20, 25 years, right? Like
that also allegedly cheated.
So I think that plays into it. But honestly, I don't think anyone's going to care about any of that unless they beat Michigan this year. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. If they don't get him this year, then it just comes back tenfold, right? So it's not fair, but it's also completely inevitable because that's the job that you have.
But it's also easy to forget that, like, you know, Michigan was favored to beat them in 2019.
Yeah.
And then they Ryan Day absolutely ran them out of the stadium.
Right.
So it's not like he can't beat Michigan. He's done it before. And then in 2020, they were so afraid of getting their tail kicked when they were like 2-4 during the COVID season that they just straight up canceled the game.
Yeah.
And then the events of the last 3 years happened. So
in context, you know, it looks different than just the bare record.
I would hope that fans would be more fair to Ryan Day about this than I think they have been. Now, if they lose this year, then there's a serious conversation that I think needs to be had, particularly given this game is at home. But I feel good about him rectifying the issue. I only hope that they're not looking so forward on that game that they overlook Oregon. And the other thing too is that when you make, I mean, there's all these players that have come back saying that one of the main reasons they came back is because they feel like they have an obligation to beat Michigan, which is something that pretty much nobody on the team at this point is familiar with having done in an Ohio State uniform.
Yeah.
When you make that the entire narrative of your season, if you don't fulfill on that, then there's that I think is an issue for your program. When you make one thing that isn't a national championship the goal, and then you can't even fulfill on that, it gives the perception that you've taken a step back. So it's very important for them. It's important every year, but given the expectation they've set for themselves and the reason they've all aligned on coming back, it's very important that they get it done this time.
Yeah, agreed. Next one here. This is from Kevin, who says, "Guys, we are still waiting to buy tickets to the Akron game. Is this justified?" If you want to go to the Akron game, I mean,
it's a season opener. Sure.
It's a season opener. Like, I get it. I mean, if I will say that it's going to be that might be tighter than most just because it's the opener, right? Like it's going to be a little harder maybe to get like last minute tickets, but that's generally the move with these games. But yeah, hey, do what you got to do, man. Like if you want to go to the game, get some good tickets and you want to feel secure in that, go ahead and get them right now. But on the other hand, if you're like, hey, I can maybe scalp some of these and get it in C deck or B deck, whatever, go for it. It's up to you, man. I think it's justified. You want to go to Akron, go to Akron. I'm with you. Bonus, by the way, my wife works for the Fairfax County Schools in Virginia. She goes back to work the 6th of August. Sounds reasonable. What are various school start dates in Columbus, the greatest city in the world? Most schools up here in Columbus are starting the 2nd and 3rd week of August. Columbus City Schools, I think, starts either the 21st or the 22nd. Other area districts start, I think a lot of them are starting the week before that. I think New Albany is doing a staggered start on like the 18th or 19th. I'm just looking. Actually, I think it's like on the 19th or 20th. But yeah, anyway, generally the 2nd or 3rd week of August, which is a very specific question that's about, like, I have seen some
question
places
for a librarian.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I was a high school social studies teacher for 12 years. I've seen some places. Ramsey was talking about how, like, one of his kids was like graduating in the middle of June, like June 20th or something like that, which is bonkers to me. I don't know why these schools. Yeah, I don't understand why these schools are ending so late. I think anytime after like Labor Day is kind of insane, but I don't know. That's the way, or Memorial Day is what I'm trying to say, is insane. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird how it's going. But Columbus is pretty sane. When I was teaching, that's about when I would report back to, and then work for a week, and then kids would start. It is what it is. This one's from Barry, who says there's never been an NCAA Division I championship in football. 2 and 3, yes, but not one, because a championship can't be voted upon. Even the last number of years between the 4 years are voted on to play. With it going to 12-team tournament, will the NCAA recognize the Division I national champion? I don't really understand that question.
Sure, Barry.
Yeah, well, so I was trying to like figure this out. So even the last number of years, because the 4 teams are voted on to play, so a championship can't be voted upon. So is that okay? So I guess what he's saying is that when you select teams for a championship rather than a play-in, like, I don't know, I guess March Madness or whatever, does that actually recognize it? So I guess I'm going to say yes, Barry. Yes, that's what I will say yes to.
And I'm saying sure.
Yes. Carl sent a really good image to me. No, to Dubcast. Sorry, to both of us here. This was about the comparison between the sign stealing scandal and the tattoo gate. And it's basically just kind of comparing what Ohio State did and what Michigan did. And so the infraction part is the best part, where it says 5 players sold memorabilia for cash and tattoos versus a vast interstate network of in-person sign stealers and dozens of games stealing signs from dozens of teams. It also says staff involvement, no, which is technically true, but also, like, Jim Tressel did lie to the NCAA. So anyway, I appreciate that. That's pretty good. Okay, and then we got another. This one's from Jen, real quick. This is less football related, I guess. After learning that Johnny has a cat named Jasper on last week's Dubcast, I'm wondering if either of you have any other pets beyond the destructive cat. I have a dog. I have a dog named Lincoln, and he's less destructive, but he hates other dogs, so we can't really take him around other dogs too often, but we want to, so occasionally we try, and then he loses his mind, and then we say, okay, that's why we don't do that. So then
after Jasper waltzed across the keyboard before we started recording last week a couple times, I proposed to Johnny that I also get my family cat, and we just start the Dubcast by holding them up in front of the camera. But he didn't want to humor Jasper thing like that. He Right. He wasn't as enthused with the idea. But yeah, we do have a family cat. His name is kind of in dispute. When we adopted him, his name was Kobe, but we also named him Duke. But I refer to him as Snooze because it's one of the only 3 things that he does is eat, sleep, and poop, and he's pretty good at all of them. So he responds to pretty much all of those.
Cat's good at 2 of those things.
He's about 17 years old. We had another cat named Skokie that we had to put down, unfortunately, earlier this year. But the reason I bring it up is because we actually adopted her during halftime of I believe it was the 2008 or 2009 Ohio State Michigan game. We were watching it at a country club for like a community event that we were invited to, and I wandered into the pro shop during halftime. This was whenever the year was that, like, Beanie Wells. It was like, I think the only touchdown of the game. It was in Michigan Stadium, and it was when.
Wells I know what you're talking about.
It
was like the 13-6 game or whatever.
Half. Right. It was a sludgy game, and I wandered into the pro shop at halftime, and I heard, like, just kind of looking around at golf stuff, and I heard like a weird faint meowing in the back, and I asked the pro shop owner, I was like, do you have a cat in here? And he called me into the back room, and I looked
have
down in this
50
box.
cats.
It was one
Don't
cat,
touch
but
them.
it was like the runtiest runt of the litter you've ever seen in your life.
Nice.
Like only no more than 6 weeks old, I think was what the vet told us. So I, after seeing this cat, beaming up at me, I went and I told my mom, you got to go to the pro shop and see this cat that's in the pro shop.
Cat.
And that was it. We
cool.
adopted her. We took her home because the guy found her, and it was November, like late November, Chicago. So it was freezing outside. He found her in the backyard and didn't know what to do with her. And we just happened to cross her because of, the Ohio State Michigan game that day, and so we had to put her down earlier this year, and rest in peace to her. She was pretty old, but she was forever tied to our relationship with the Ohio State Michigan rivalry because
that's
of
really
that.
cool.
So,
I'm a big fan. Adopting pets, I think, is always the way to go. I had a dog named Sandy when I was a little kid, all throughout growing up, and she was hilarious because she just like ate everything. She was incredibly destructive, and I found it very funny as a kid. I'm sure my parents found it less funny, but she would do stuff like eat book bindings. She liked the glue that bound books together, like on the spines, and so she would gnaw on it. She would eat leather, like she would take watches and then eat the bands of watches and then just like leave the remains. I don't know. One time she ate she would get into like teas that we had, like eat an entire box of tea just because she could smell it. Like she's just a very odd dog, but she was a great dog. I was around dogs my entire childhood. At family events and things like that, there were always at least 3 or 4 dogs running around. And at my Aunt Sue's house, it was always pretty good because there was a collection of dogs that were like, some of them were really chill, some of them were old and angry, some of them were like actively dangerous. And so like it was kind of fun to kind of gauge which one. Like there was one named Leroy that was a sheepdog that actually killed a sheep and had to be put down. That was I didn't get around. I was like, I'm staying away from that dog. But there was another dog that like, he was a Jack Russell Terrier and he like peed everywhere and he was my best friend. And when I got older, I was like, wow, that dog probably peed.
You sure know how to pick them, Johnny.
I sure do. But yeah, man, pets are great. Dogs are great. Animals are great. Jen says that she had a family had an indoor-outdoor cat named Murphy, which is a great name for a pet. She was out in the middle of the night, later than usual, jumped on her bed. Just so happens I was reading Pet Cemetery at the time. I was convinced she was a zombie cat. That's ominous. I have a sad story. My grandma had a dog named Max, and they would let this dog. It was a little tiny, like Pekingese kind of thing, not a Pekingese, but a Maltese, I guess. And they would let it out at night, and they were kind of out in the boonies, not like super far out, but far enough out to where there's other animals running around. It's like, man, someone's going to get that thing, and sure enough, eventually, a coyote ate poor old Max. So
that's why we don't let our cats outside.
That's right. It's not good for them. It's not good for the environment. Last one here real quick. This is from a good friend, Alvin. If you had to compete today without any training in Paris in a sport, what would you try, knowing that despite your poor performance, how dare you assume that your performance would be televised to the whole world?
I know Johnny would excel in water polo.
No, God, no. Right. I would not do that. I would stay the hell away from that. I would die. I would probably be drowned by a 275-pound Hungarian. No, I have absolutely not. No, I would do a sport where people DQ all the time, so it wouldn't matter. Like nobody would really know. Like, shot put where people just like bomb out, like they screw up 3 shot puts. Like, I screwed up. Like I would just do that, and then nobody would know. If I was trying to do some modicum of like appearing that I knew how to do the sport, I don't know, like swimming or something like that, you know what I mean? Like I do one of those like early things. Or I was watching the Olympics earlier today, and I watched the hell out of the Olympics. They had the early rounds of the 100-meter dash, and people from pretty much anywhere can participate. Like you just have to kind of advance through whatever region of the world you're in. So some of them are running like 12, 13 second 100-yard dashes, which is still fast, but it's not like fast, right? Like it's fast for a normal person, but like not fast for the Olympics. I would just do that. I would just like, suck ass at in one of the early rounds and then just go home and chill and eat some food in the athletes village. I think that's what I would do. just trying to play it low key as possible, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'd probably do the air pistol stuff, the
Oh yeah.
not only
You want to become a meme like that one.
Well, that has seemed to
Yeah.
not only does that seem to have the greatest meme potential, but also if you like, it seems like that would be the least embarrassing if you screw up. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's
it's
that's
it's
actually
only
a really
like a
good point.
fractional amount of like, it's like, oh yeah, I'll still probably hit the target. I just won't be as accurate as everyone else.
Yeah.
So I won't medal, but it's
And
not
you're not
like,
gonna, fall in your face or anything. You just gotta stand
it's not
there.
like I'll do like pole vaulting and not even make it up all the way, or get tripped up by my genitals like that one guy did. So So yeah,
suffering from success.
I think I'd go with the riflery.
That's actually that's a
and I can draw on the knowledge of the Ohio State esteemed several national championship winning state. Yeah, I'll be like, can you guys help me not totally make an ass of myself in this event?
Yeah,
They'll be like, why are you of all the Buckeyes going to the Olympics?
Because Alvin told me I had to. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you guys for sending in those questions to ask us anything. We'll keep answering them, and especially as we get closer to the football season. A few things before we get out of here. We got to mention Carmen's crew hitting up that final. I think was it an Elam ending? I think that they
that's what
nailed
they call it, the Elam ending.
Yeah,
they've had a few exciting finishes in that tournament, but none more exciting than the final today.
They nailed the Elam ending. They beat the Forever Cougs, the Houston alumni team. They took them out.
I want to be Forever Cougs.
Jared Sullinger was named the MVP of the tournament. They won $1 million. Everybody, yeah, that's right. And everybody split the $1 million pot evenly, which is a cool $62,500 a piece. There's a really great video of Caleb Wesson reacting to the money getting deposited into his account, like in real time. Like he sees
after
it
chucking up like 2 or 3 air balls in the final 5 minutes of the game, I'm sure nobody was happier to get that money than he was.
Hey man, you know what? If you're on the team, you get the cash.
It was so funny that like the other day when they were playing the Kentucky team in the semifinal, and I said, the last few going back to like not just the quarterfinals, but even the game before that where they had like a 15-point lead and they had to make a 3 when it was like a 1 possession game apiece in order to win the Elam ending in that one. Mm-hmm. And I said, boy, this team has really made a habit of squandering big leads, and hopefully they can buck that trend, down the stretch. And not only did they not do that and did so again today, nearly blowing a 10-point lead, but then Dan and Andy,
Ohio State team blowing a lead.
Well, Dan and Andy then both reacted to what I said with the Chris Holtman emoji in Slack, which is like, oh, this is the team we just saw is just like the alumni. Their habits have not changed whatsoever. Hey. This program is just stuck in this trend.
But unlike Chris Holtman's teams, they did end up pulling it out at the end. They got $1 million.
Their whole trend was bend, don't break the entire tournament, and they wrote it all the way. Although they tried to break today. I mean, that moment was they were like, those were some creative air balls throughout the game. It wasn't just Caleb Wesson. Andre Wesson had a really bad one. There was, I forget what the name of the number 10 on the team was, but he had one that like they were eliciting screams from the commentary booth in terms of how off some of the shots at the end of the game were. So Sully was the only one prepared to perform in that moment.
But they won $1 million.
That's
right. $1 million. They each got $62,000, and they're sitting pretty. So congrats to them.
They are only the second team in the history of TBT to win the championship multiple times. So that's great to see. We love it. How firm thy friendship.
That's right. A couple other things I want to say before we get out of here. I just want to point out natural grass was installed in the stadium for the friendly between Man City and Chelsea. And I know they said it like sucked, but I just want to point out that it was possible to put grass in the stadium. It didn't spontaneously combust into flame.
I'm sure you and all the agricultural nerds at the largest land grant institution are stoked about this.
I'm just saying that it's possible. And I understand that they're like, the namby-pambies on these teams are like, it's not up. I can't do a British accent, but like, it's not up to our current standards. But
it's horrible, is what Jack
it's
Grealish
horrible.
said. Horrible.
I'm glad we'll be back on Tuesday.
Rubbish.
A failure. But anyway, my point is that it's possible it can happen. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there. Last thing, the Big Ten they debuted the new Maps commercial. You know, the one that it's like "I Want to Live Forever" and it's the animated maps, and they added the new school.
I'd hardly call it new. It was more updated.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. They just added more stuff, and it's funny because people like clamored for this. They're like, "Oh my god, I gotta have this freaking Maps commercial. My life is meaningless without this freaking Maps commercial. I need to see this Maps commercial for the love of God." And then when it came out, people were like, "It's pretty much the same thing." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what you wanted. That's what you were screaming about." And like, it's fine. I like the commercial. Also, I don't base my sense of
because they were lamenting the demise of it. They thought we were going to get something different.
People were losing their minds about it. I'm like, guys, like we can't have this much emotional attachment to a commercial for an athletic conference. Like we gotta just chill. And it's there. It's still there. It's fine. We'll still see it 150 times during the football
Americans, and advertisements are an integral part of our sports viewing experience.
How do I know
this is
how
what
to
separates us from the Europeans that don't appreciate the grass field at Ohio Stadium?
Right. Yeah. Or like the menagerie or clavicle or whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but the point is that advertising is how I base my sense of self-worth. Like I don't have anything to compare it to unless I see a commercial with cute animations about, I don't know, hot dog stand.
The SEC doesn't have a commercial like this.
No, their commercial
the Big 12 doesn't have a commercial like
the SEC
this.
has it just means more commercial where
right.
they rub it in our face about how
it's very important for the sake of conference pride and the wars that we wage against in the ongoing civil war against SEC fans that we say we have the best commercial. It's not enough to say you have the most prestigious conference relative to football or basketball. You must brag about your advertising chops. And the Big Ten.
If you were going to replace the song in that commercial, what would you replace it with?
I don't know. It's a catchy song. I think that's honestly probably the biggest reason. What I do think, there's like a line very early in the song about like living by the sea or something, and right. I thought that was like very out of character for like the conference, at least before the addition of all these West Coast teams. So now I actually think the song fits even better than it ever did before. But in terms of what I would replace it with, I don't know. What's like we need some like grungy, like emo Midwestern
No,
song.
I would do like 9 Inch Nails. Like Trent Reznor's from Cleveland. Like I would I would do like some 9 Inch Nails or something. I tore apart my insides. Like something like that.
Do When the Summer Ends by American Football. That seems like the perfect song choice, both band name and yeah.
Yeah, I'd like that. So anyway, commercial's back. That means football's almost back. We're excited. Hooray. And look, hey, like we said, notice of allegations. Maybe that's going to be hilarious and fun. Quarterback might be set in place. Things are happening. The gears are moving. We will eventually get football. That's right.
August is here.
August is here.
Only
so
a handful of weeks away now.
That's right. And we're glad that you're joining us on this magical adventure into the 2024 college football season. So we'll be back next week to talk about all of it. Until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.